trumpeting retreat from the Americans. Surovikin, this is the commander for Ukraine under Putin, will make Ukraine scream. He will reach Kiev and take Kharkov, Kherson, and Donbass. Let the West retreat immediately. A well-known American media is calling on NATO and the USA to withdraw immediately from Ukraine and not to escalate a war which for the West is already lost. As he reports, Surovikin is expected to arrive at the gates of Kiev, which is the capital of Ukraine, it's in the center of Ukraine, in the spring, while Kharkov, Kherson, and the entire Donbass will come under Russian control. In more detail, an open opinion article in the American magazine Newsweek refers to a turning point in the war in Ukraine, which states that the Russian military forces are not only not demoralized, as the West admits wants to present them, but on the contrary, they have been equipped with the most modern weapons at the moment wherein the Ukrainian soldiers are shown to have done all they could. Let's remember that Ukraine is now conscripting women, 50,000 women. Now, according to the publication, it's estimated that Russia is planning a massive offensive, which is very likely to have recaptured Kharkov, Kherson, and all of Donbass by the summer of 2023. At this point, it's pointed out that what the US must do now is to convince Kiev to sit at the negotiating table and not prolong the suffering of the Ukrainian people any longer. The publication attempts to draw a parallel to the American Civil War, when in the early years President Abraham Lincoln sought a limited conflict with his countrymen with whom he wanted reconciliation. After 3 years of deadlock, he reportedly ordered a decisive violent end. President Putin waited just 6 months before moving from a special military operation to a full-scale war in Ukraine. Putin's initial offensive had begun with 150,000 troops. He expected a quick victory followed by negotiations on the following issues: Russian control of Crimea, neutrality of Ukraine, Russian autonomy in Donbass. But he was wrong. He had not counted on the fierce resistance of Ukraine and the massive military and economic intervention of the West. Faced with these facts, he changed his strategy. And now he's going to make Ukraine scream, the report said, drawing parallels with Lincoln's order to U.S. General William Tecumseh Sherman to make Georgia scream. It is no coincidence that today the Russian President Vladimir Putin made unusually harsh statements. Quote, "Yes, we're striking and will continue to strike energy infrastructure in Ukraine. It is responsible for the terrorist attacks in Kiev. They attacked the Kerch Bridge. They attacked Kursk. They cut off water in Crimea. An act of genocide," Vladimir Putin said, announcing new fierce raids. The order to Surovikin. Last month, Putin put General Sergei Surovikin in overall command of Russia's war in Ukraine. Surovikin comes from the technologically advanced Air Force, but has fought in Afghanistan, Chechnya, and Syria, where he's credited with saving the Assad government. Surovikin has publicly stated that there will be no half measures in Ukraine. Instead, it has begun to methodically destroy Ukraine's infrastructure with precision missile attacks. Armies need railroads, and Surovikin destroyed the power grid that powers Ukrainian railroads. This has left Ukrainian cities cold and dark, but Surovikin seems to agree with American General Sherman that, quote, "War is brutality and you cannot perfect it," end quote. Equipped with the most modern weapons, according to Newsweek, Russia has put its economy on war footing, calling up reserves and mustered hundreds of thousands of troops, including conscripts and volunteers. This army is equipped with Russia's most sophisticated weaponry, and contrary to many Western reports, it is far from demoralized. Ukraine, on the other hand, has exhausted its arsenals and is completely dependent on Western military support to continue the war. As chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff, General Mark Miley noted last week, Ukraine has done what it can. Bakhmut, Kharkov, Kherson, Donbass will pass to the Russians. In fact, it's pointed out that as soon as the territory of Ukraine freezes, it's estimated that a new massive attack by Russia will begin. As reported, it has already started at the major transport hub of Bakhmut. We expect Bakhmut to fall and predict that without much more Western aid, Russia will recapture Kharkov, Kherson, and what's left of Donbass by the summer of 2023, the publication said. The role of the West, as the West did in Vietnam, Afghanistan, and Iraq, we're stumbling into yet another optional military commitment. Ukrainian soldiers are trained in Europe. Western arms manufacturers are supplying Ukraine with military equipment and operating HIMARS missile systems. Active duty U.S. soldiers monitor arms deliveries to Ukraine. As the Russian offensive gains momentum, we estimate that there will be louder voices for sending more and more advanced weapons to Ukraine, and even for NATO intervention to defend Ukraine. The publication emphasized, pointing out that these voices must be rejected for many reasons, not in greater involvement. As Newsweek points out, generations of Western leaders have successfully worked to avoid direct military conflict with the Soviet Union. They recognize that, unlike Moscow, the West has very little strategic interest in who controls Donetsk. They certainly were not willing to risk a nuclear war over Kharkov. Ukraine is not a member of NATO, and the alliance has no obligation to defend it. Putin did not threaten any NATO members either, but made it clear that any foreign troops entering Ukraine would be treated as enemy combatants. Sending NATO troops to Ukraine would thus turn the proxy war with Russia into a real war with the world's largest nuclear power. Risk of generalized ignition. It is pointed out that no one can ignore the danger that the tensions in this region will spread to another. There is an increasing possibility that Iran will launch a preemptive military strike on Israel. The revolutionary regime in Iran is facing an increasingly serious popular uprising. A new government in Israel is determined to prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons. A war would unite Iran's population in a patriotic struggle, damage Israel's ability to strike Iran, and pressure the West to negotiate an end to sanctions, the report said, arguing that the concern is that Iran supplies Russia with weapons for its war in Ukraine, which may mean Moscow may feel compelled to help its allies in Iran. This domino effect is exactly what started the First World War. Who would have expected that the assassination of an Austrian Grand Duke by a Serbian anarchist in Bosnia would lead to the deaths of thousands of Americans in France? We don't need a repeat. Maybe we're wrong, maybe there won't be a Russian winter offensive, or maybe the Ukrainian armed forces will be able to stop it. However, if we are right, and February finds General Surovikin at the gates of Kiev, we must soberly consider and honestly discuss as a nation and alliance the extent of our commitment to Ukraine and the risks we're willing to accept for our security, concludes the Newsweek article. This I've translated from a Greek article. Please leave your comments. Thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.